nobody on this road that can save your soul. Almost lost control now. Tell me what you need in a friend and now. Pray that we endure to the end again. I'm just saying that I'm here for you. When the world turn against you, I'ma be with you. Got my sword in my hand, you can count on me. I won't run and hide, fight mightily.
Waiting on O.F.I. See the Jacob, I'm the apple of my father's eye. I learned the truth for who I was and it made me cry. If I don't keep the laws of Yah, then I'm gonna die. Living curses, but I'm edifying in my verses. Prepare the hearses for the heathens who be steady.
Khan. Call out Yahweh Shema Mashek, Mom like O.F.I. Rock a thumb for the 12 tribes scattered abroad. Greetings to the hopeful elect, right? Enduring in His truth week in and week out, day in and day out, moment in and moment out, as we get closer to the second coming of our Lord and Savior, Mashiach, Mom like O.F.I. It's been a lot of false doctrine going on lately, a lot of false teachings. I believe some brothers may teach in sincerity, some brothers may be just mistaken, some brothers may be teaching out of their own vain opinion, right? But nevertheless, we're here to bring out the truth and to bring out the understanding and the foundational understanding of the truth, right? And there's a lot been going on. I titled this particular live Gentile Salvation for Everyone. There's been a lot of talks going on throughout the nation about this Gentile salvation topic, right? So we're going to tap into it tonight, right? We're going to tap into it tonight through the Spirit and power of Yahweh Shem Yahushai. And we are going to start with the foundation in terms of the kingdom divided. So in order to understand, okay, are Gentiles saved? Is salvation for everybody? Is salvation? And what is salvation? Is salvation only for the lost sheep of the house of Israel? This is something that has been heavily debated, right? Heavily debated, especially in the modern times. In these last couple of months, has been a heavy topic, not only in the nation of Israel, right? The so-called Blacks, Latinos, and Native Americans of indigenous descent, but it's also been something that's been in widespread Christianity in the Christian domain, apologists and things of that nature. So we're going to dive into it, but we're going to dive into it from the historical context and try to slow walk this thing, right? And all that getting, it says get understanding. So we're going to try to get the understanding of why are certain doctrines being pushed and what is the true understanding, and how do you show forth that true understanding so you don't basically be caught out here in false doctrine. All right. So a couple of foundational things that one needs to understand in terms of when you hear the word Gentile, Gentile just means nation. All right. Israel is called Gentile as well because Israel is a nation. All nations are called Gentile in certain aspects because it just means nation, right? So we think scripturally and we think biblically, historically, what happened for Israel to be considered two nations? Because see, a lot of people don't even realize that Israel has been called two nations. So if you don't realize that history, you're going to be caught out here unaware. And it's going to sound strange to you. It's going to sound like a strange doctrine. Well, what do you mean? I thought the 12 tribes were one nation. I thought the 12 tribes were the nation of Israel. Well, in fact, they were split. And because of that split, the northern kingdom and the southern kingdom were actually called two nations, which we're going to get into. So, first, the kingdom divided. Solomon's sin caused Yahweh to rend the kingdom of Yasha'Allah of Israel into two. Understanding the split, the foundation is the foundation for understanding who the Greeks and Gentiles are in the New Testament. This is very important. If you don't understand that there was a split between the northern and the southern kingdom in the Old Testament, you're not going to understand the New Testament contextually, who the New Testament writers are writing to, chiefly Paul, because a lot of people get Paul's letters, which Peter even said are hard to be understood. They get them twisted. So it's very important. Now, when you go into the 12 tribes of the nation of Israel, you see you got Asher, Naphtali, Zebulun, Issachar, and Manasseh. You have Manasseh was split, right? One side of the Jordan. That's why I said in the book of Judges, talks about the half tribe of Manasseh and then the other half tribe of Manasseh that went over the Jordan River, right? Remember, they had to go and fight, okay? For their brethren to get the other portion of the land. You got Ephraim, you got Dan, you got Gad, Reuben. All right, this is chiefly what is known, and then Simeon as well. This is chiefly what is known as the northern kingdom. And then you have Judah, Benjamin, and Levi. Now remember, the Levites had allocations of land within the suburbs of all of the other tribes. They didn't have their own allocation of land. So that's very important to know and to understand, right? So when you go into the northern kingdom and the southern kingdom being split, that's how you're getting into the understanding foundationally of who the Gentiles are in context when that word is used, and who the Greeks are in context when that word is used, and even who the Grecians are, or even you'll see the word Hellene. These are very important words to understand in context, right? So Solomon, remember, Solomon's heart was turned after strange gods, all right, from the marriages of the foreign wives. And he served Ashtoreth, the god of the Zidonians, the god of the Moabites, Milcom. You follow what I'm saying? Solomon was going to hell off. Now, the brother was mighty. Don't get me wrong. The Most High blessed him with a whole different level of knowledge, wisdom, and understanding. We get that. But Solomon was going off, all right? We're going to get this 1 Kings 11 and 4 through 6. For it came to pass, when Solomon was old, that his wives turned away his heart after other gods. And his heart was not perfect with Yahweh his God, as was the heart of David his father. For Solomon went after Ashtoreth, the goddess of the Zidonians, and after Milcom, the abomination of the Amorites. And Solomon did evil in the sight of Yahweh, and went not fully after Yahweh, as did David his father. So Solomon welcomed in sin and judgment, not only for him and his household, but for the household of Israel, for the nation of Israel, because of Solomon went off, right? So 1 Kings 11 and 13, it says, wherefore the Lord Yahweh said unto Solomon, repeat this, for as much as this is done of thee, and thou hast not kept my covenant and my statutes, which I have commanded thee, I will surely rend the kingdom from thee, and will give it to thy servant. Notwithstanding, in thy days I will not do it for David thy father's sake, but I will rend it out of the hand of thy son. Howbeit, I will not rend away all the kingdom. This is key. Now, the Most High God said that he's not going to take all 12 tribes from Solomon, but he was going to rend the kingdom. But will give one tribe to thy son for David my servant's sake. And we know that's the tribe of Judah. And for Jerusalem's sake, which I have chosen. Now, what we got to realize, family, is all of this was done prophetically. All of this was set up since the beginning of time, all right? When the Most High declared his covenant people and who his covenant people were, the Most High had already had all of this in play. This isn't something that just kind of happened haphazardly and so forth and so on. This was always in play. It's just through the dispensation of time, certain prophetic things had to unfold in order for the fullness of the Most High's promise through Abraham, through Isaac, through Jacob to come to pass. All right. And this is the thing fundamentally what a lot of people get caught up on, right? Even when it gets tied to who are the lost sheep, right? When you even go into the Hebrew of the word sheep, when you go into the San, which is 86629, when you go into which goes into a people, when you go into probaton in the Greek, which is another word for sheep that we see in the New Testament, which means the covenant people of Yahweh, or even when you go to eklata, right, which is basically where you get the word elect or chosen from. All of this points back to the children of Israel, all right? So bam, the 10 tribes to Jeroboam and 1 tribe to Solomon's son, Rehoboam. So Yahweh gave 10 tribes to Jeroboam, who was the son of Nebat. Then that's the northern kingdom, all right? And then he kept 1 tribe for Solomon's son, Rehoboam, which is the southern kingdom. Remember, 1 Kings 11, he said, for David's sake, look, I will not do it for David thy father's sake. So the Most High did not snatch the whole kingdom from Solomon for his father's sake. And we just said that. Howbeit, I will not, this is 1 Kings 11 and 34 through 36. Howbeit, I will not take the whole kingdom out of his hand, but I will make him prince all the days of his life for David my servant's sake. See, the Most High God swore unto David. He made an oath, all right, whom I chose because he kept my commandments and my statutes. But I will take the kingdom out of his son's hand and will give it unto thee, even 10 tribes, all right? And unto his son will I give 1 tribe, that David my servant may have a light always before me in Jerusalem, the city which I have chosen me to put my name there. So we gotta realize, y'all, what's really going on, man. This is something, when we talk about Gentile salvation, we have to realize the foundational principles, because the Most High God is not a man that he should lie, or the son of man that he should repent. The Most High God does not change. The Most High God does not switch up on his covenant. He's not LeBron. He doesn't damn switch teams. All right. The Most High God is very, very righteous and very, very sure in his prophecies. It says, paraphrasing, not one should want their mate, Salakia. So everything that he says and that he calls forth and that he declares forth, it will come to pass. All right. So when you think about the southern kingdom, that's chiefly the Jews. You got Judah, Benjamin, and Levi, right? Yehoiada, Benjamin, and Loya, right? Which is Levi in the Hebrew, the Paleo. So Levi are the priests, the priestly tribe who fled south, because we know that when the kingdom split under Jeroboam, Jeroboam was going to hell off. He did not want the children of Israel, right? Chiefly the 10 tribes, to go back to Jerusalem to worship. So he set up a damn abomination for them to worship, and the Levites wasn't with it. So the Levites fled, remember, all right? So you got the capital in the southern kingdom, Jerusalem. Collectively, this is what, when we say the Jews, we know sometimes in context, all of the children of Israel on a couple of occasions are called the Jews. But we know chiefly and primarily when it's saying the Jews, it's talking about the southern kingdom, which is Judah, Benjamin, and Levi. Now we know also you hear Jew as being going back to the tribe of Judah as well, which could sometimes be specifically only talking about that one tribe. But in this context, when it says the Jews, we're talking about the southern kingdom. Because remember, what's going to be tied to it when Christ was on the scene, walking the earth, he was walking where the southern kingdom, for the most part, was there in Jerusalem. Now, you did have, as we see in the book of Luke and certain other places, and even as we see in the book of Tobit, you did have certain of the northern kingdom, which was still sprinkled among the southern kingdom. But we know chiefly most of the northern kingdom, by a vast majority, was already taken into captivity and not in the land at that time that Yahushua was walking the earth. Now, Israel is the northern kingdom, all right? Because once again, you got Jeroboam, 10 tribes went to him, pursuant to 1 Kings 11, 34 on down about 36. And then you got the northern king, which is the northern kingdom. And then you got Rehoboam, which is Solomon's son, who had that one tribe, which was the southern kingdom. So once again, the 10 tribes under Jeroboam, also called Ephraim, or the house of Joseph, because we know Joseph's sons, Ephraim and Manasseh, right? From that perspective, you know, Ephraim got the blessing, okay? The capital city was Samaria, where the capital city was Jerusalem for the southern kingdom. And remember, they fell into idolatry, worshiping the golden calves, devils, the high places where they were burning incense onto, other gods and things of that nature. So eventually they were scattered in 2 Kings 17 in the 6th chapter by the Assyrians. All right. And that's how too you see, even when it came to Matthew, matter of fact, when you think about Yahweh Shai, when he said in Matthew 10 and 5, matter of fact, let me get this real quick. I want to get this real quick. In Matthew 10 and 5, that's why Yahweh Shai said, enter not into the towns right here. Look, Matthew 10 and 12 and 5. These 12 Yahweh Shai sent forth and commanded them, saying, go not into the way of the Gentiles, and into any city of the Samaritans enter ye not, but go rather unto the house, but go rather to the lost sheep of the house of Israel. Okay, because we know what happened during the Assyrian captivity in 2 Kings, when the northern kingdom was taken into captivity and taken out of the land, right? So from that perspective, reading on. So Jeroboam, now remember, all of this is like the Most High, man, is the master cinematographer. He's the master writer. He's the master director. He's the master producer. He's the master executive producer, executive director, however you want to classify it, right? And I say that because when you think about how the Most High has allowed this movie, this film of life to play out, all of this is leading historically to align prophetically with the New Testament. And a lot of brothers, even, we got Old Testament onlys who, and we love them brothers and sisters, but they don't get it, right? They reject the so-called New Testament, not realizing that when Paul and the apostles, the disciples, chiefly the apostles, when they were on the scene as well, there was no New Testament. Our beloved brother Paul wasn't walking around with the book of Philippians and Corinthians and Romans and Ephesians and Titus and First Timothy. He wasn't walking around with those. Those are epistles. He was teaching out of the law. So you have to understand fundamentally the so-called New Testament is aligned with the so-called Old Testament, the Torah, the Tanakh, the prophets, the Psalms, the Proverbs. It all lines up, but you have to have the right understanding, and that's why you have to know the history. So this is why we're taking the time tonight through the Spirit and power of Yahweh Shem Yahweh Shai to dive deep into this history and to go into what it is versus what it isn't. So once again, Jeroboam's idolatry and the Levites flee. So Jeroboam sets up a golden calf. He appointed his own priest from the lowest of the people, not the Levites. Remember, the Most High God chose the Levites, right, to be the royal priesthood, okay? So from that perspective, we can see that he was going off by not choosing the Levites to maintain the office, okay, that the Most High God declared. And I'm gonna get this precept, Deuteronomy 18 and 6. It says, and if a Levite come from any of thy gates out of all of Israel, where he sojourn, and come with all the desires of his mind unto the place which the Lord thy God should choose him, then he shall minister, zoom this, then he shall minister in the name of Yahweh his God, as all his brethren the Levites do, which stand there before Yahweh. So it doesn't matter where the Levites were, all right? It does not matter. Wherever the Levites were, the Levites had to be the royal priesthood. So when Jeroboam, the son of Nebat, set up the lowest of men who were not Levites to be his priest, he was going to hell off. And he led the northern kingdom into wholesale idolatry. The Levites and faithful Israelites abandoned their possessions in the north and fled to the south. Right now, remember, once again, the Levites all had suburbs. All right, let me get this real quick, because when we read in 2 Chronicles, all right, I want to get this real quick. Bam. Second Chronicles, it says 11 and 14. For the Levites left their suburbs and their possessions and came to Judah and Jerusalem. For Jeroboam and his sons had cast them off from executing the priest's office unto the Lord. And we saw once again in Deuteronomy 18 and 7, no matter where the Levites were, all right, if a Levite came and sojourned among you, you had to allow them to execute the offices and the duties of the prince. Shalom, King. And so from that perspective, you know, in order, once again, to understand this whole Gentile salvation situation, you got to understand the history. So when you go into Jeroboam falling into idolatry, right? And this is why the Levites fled and why the Levites went from the northern kingdom and left the suburb in their land allotments and went back to, left the northern kingdom and went back to the southern kingdom. So key point of understanding, right? After the split, you had a northern kingdom who went into idolatry and was eventually conquered by the Assyrians. This is why you see the dispersion. So well before you get to Gentile salvation and being confused of, okay, is this talking about, you know, Israelites who have been scattered, who have gone into idolatry, who have been Hellenized? There was a process to that. Or is this talking about heathen, Ben Nakar, son of the strangers, right, as Gentiles? And this is the only way you're going to get the concrete understanding through the spirit and power of Yahweh Shem Yahushua if you know and understand the history. All right? If you know and understand the history. All right? So moving on. So the scattering of both kingdoms. Now this is very important. Pursuant to 2 Kings 17 and 6, which we're going to go into. Both the northern kingdom and the southern kingdom were scattered to different lands at different times, from the Syrian captivity on the northern kingdom to the Babylonian captivity, right, on the southern kingdom. That's why you see, like Daniel, where was he at? He was in Babylon. You follow what I'm saying? So our joint captivity, as we know, chiefly started off with the Egyptians. But after that, there were various captivities that each of the tribe and each of the kingdom went through. So 2 Kings 17 and 6 says, in the 9th year of Hosea, which is Hosea, the king of Assyrians took Samaria. Now remember, Samaria is the northern kingdom. All right, that was where the capital of the northern kingdom was, Samaria. That's in Ephraim. All right, and carried Israel away into Assyria. Now, when it says Israel here, notice in context, this is talking about the northern kingdom. That's why it says Samaria. This isn't talking about all 12 tribes. Away into Assyria, and placed them in Halah and in Habor by the river Gozan and in the city of the Medes. So once again, when we go to that Matthew 10 and 5 in the so-called New Testament, when Yahushua is given a great commission and said, enter not into the city of the Samaritans, we know because at that time as well, who was there? You follow what I'm saying? A lot of the Israelites have been displaced, and they have been put in those cities, were replaced with the Assyrians and things of that nature, right? So you gotta understand the timelines, the time frames, the prophecies, the histories, the whole 9 yards of what the Most High had preordained and prescribed before you can ever understand or comprehend damn Gentile salvation or Gentile not salvation. So even if you look in this is the Ark of Titus in Rome. It's Roman soldiers carrying the sacred menorah from the destroyed temple, fulfilling the prophecies of Israel's scattering, right? So we're going to go into a little bit of timeline right here. You have in 722 BC, the northern kingdom was scattered by Assyria into Halah, Habor, and the river Gozan, and the cities of the Medes. From there, they migrated Salakia further into the Persian, Greek, and Roman territories over centuries. Then you had the Southern Kingdom, 586 BC, taken captive to Babylon by Nebuchadnezzar. You had Nebuchadnezzar all the way to Cyrus, and so forth and so on. We even see in Daniel, matter of fact, I want to get this real quick, in Daniel, the 2nd chapter, right? Let me get this real quick. Because even in Daniel, the 2nd chapter, you're going to see, where is it at? Bam, bam, bam. Hold on. Maybe it's Daniel, the 1st chapter I'm thinking about, and the children of whom there was no blemish. Right here. So peep this. It says, this is Daniel 1, and you see right here, Daniel 1:1. In the 3rd year of the reign of Joachim, king of Judah, came Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, into Jerusalem and besieged it. And Yahweh gave Jehoiakim, king of Judah, into his hand with part of the vessels of the house of God, which he carried into the land of Shinar to the house of his God, and he brought the vessels into the treasures of his God. Now, Pete, you see that that Judah, the southern kingdom, was taken into captivity. Now, watch this. If you go down, you're going to see Daniel. Look at verse 21. And Daniel continued even unto the 1st year of King Cyrus. So you see clearly Nebuchadnezzar all the way to Cyrus. This is still the southern kingdom being in captivity in Babylon, right? So when we go back here and we get into the southern kingdom, 586 BC, taken captive to Babylon by Nebuchadnezzar, many returned after 70 years, but many also scattered into Egypt, Greek cities, Rome, North Africa, and throughout the Mediterranean world, which you see in Acts the 2nd chapter as we come into the celebration of Pentecost, why there were devout Jews out of all these nations, right? By the time Yahushua and the apostles, Israelites from both kingdoms were scattered across the known world, living in Greek cities, speaking Greek, and being called Greek. This is the context for the entire New Testament and why people are confused when it says Gentile salvation, because these Gentiles that can only be saved are Gentiles who are of the ethnic seed line of the children of Israel. All right. You got anything on that, King? You can jump in, King Salaki. You know, we get excited. We get excited about these topics and get to going, man. But you got the floor, Malak.
All praise to the Most High. My computer had just cut out for about 10 seconds. But all praise to the Most High. Yeah, we'll pick up on that. All praises, man. Glad to be here. Y'all about Shimei Shabrak. All praise. Yeah, this is as they call a hot topic right now in Israel. All praise to the Most High, man. But we don't come to throw no shade or anything. We just come to educate through the spirit and power of Yahweh Shai and real sincerity. So yeah, we got to understand that words have meanings. The word Gentile has a meaning. Now, when we go into, I want to look something up real quick. Can you look up on Google, on the screen, Gentile etymology? Lord willing. Now, did you go into this already?
No, La King. Okay. You got it.
It says, can you zoom in a little more?
That better?
Yeah. The English word Gentile derives from the Latin word gentilis, meaning of or belonging to the same family, people, or nation. Over centuries of religious and historical translations, the term shifted in meaning to specifically describe someone who is not of Jewish descent. So what we got to understand is not only did the doctrine shift with replacement theology, but even the words definitions have shifted based off of how they falsely interpret the scriptures. We got to understand what the brother is bringing out There's a reason why Israelites are being referred to as Gentiles in the so-called New Testament. And you're going to see it time and time again throughout the New Testament where Israelites are referred to as Gentiles. But you got to understand that Gentile has a context, right? So, yes, Gentiles can be saved if they are Israelite Gentiles. Now, believe it or not, you can be a Gentile of a heathen nation, or you can be an Israelite being referred to as a Gentile. Let's go to Romans chapter 9, Lord willing. Go to Romans chapter 9. And you know what? We'll start at the top, but we're gonna jump a little bit. We'll start at the top. All right, it says, I say the truth in Christ, I lie not. My conscience also bearing with me witness in the Holy Spirit, that I have great heaviness and continual sorrow in my heart, for I wish that myself were accursed from Hamashiach, from my brethren, my kinsmen, according to the flesh. So we're getting some context of Romans chapter 9 of who Paul is talking to. We all know that Paul is an Israelite from the tribe of Benjamin, of the seed of Abraham. But we're getting some context of who he's referring to in Romans chapter 9. It says, who are Israelites, to whom pertaineth the adoption, and the glory, and the covenants, and the giving of the law, and the service of God, and the promises. Now, all of that is key because all those things belong to specifically the Israelites. It says, whose are the fathers, of whom as concerning the flesh Christ came, who is over all, God bless forever. Amen. Not as though the word of God have taken none effect, for they are not all Israel which are of Israel. Neither because they are the seed of Abraham are they all children. So just descending from the man named Abraham does not make you a child of Israel. It says, but in Isaac shall thy seed be called, right? Because the promise went through Isaac. So reading on, it says, that is, they which are the children of the flesh are not the children of God, but the children of the promise are counted for the seed. So you got to understand that promise, that same promise in verse 8 is the same promise that's in verse 4. The children of the promise. Just because Abraham had children of the flesh does not mean that all of them, all of his children, all of his descendants were the children of Israel, right? Now, let's jump down to verse number 24. This is key. And this is going right into what the brother was teaching with the split. And understand that sometimes you're going to see in the so-called New Testament, part of Israel, the southern kingdom, be referred to as Jews, right? But when you see that in certain contexts, you cannot think or forget that Israel is not just comprised of 3 tribes. Israel is 12 tribes. Jacob had 12 sons. So you have to keep everything in a proper context. It says, even us, whom he hath called, not from the Jews only, but also of the Gentiles. So what do we do with that? We got to keep it in its proper context and understand that Israelites can be Gentiles. It says not of the Jews only, so that would only be referring to the southern kingdom. So what is it saying here? Not of the southern kingdom only, but also of all of Israel, because all of Israel at one point ended up going off. Now we know that the northern kingdom went off first, like the brother was teaching earlier, but the Jews also ended up going off and going off into idolatry, right? So it wasn't a calling of just the Jews only, i.e. the southern tribe, but also of the northern kingdom and all of Israel. But you see Israelites being referred to as Gentiles in this context. Let's read on. It says, as he saith also in O.F.I, which is referring to Hosea, I will call them my people, which were not my people, and her beloved, which was not my beloved. So the split and the diaspora, the scattering from Deuteronomy 28 and 64, right? Then you see it referred to in the New Testament with scriptures like James 1 and 1. He's talking to the Israelites who are scattered abroad, the 12 tribes. You got to understand the brother is going to and starting at a beautiful place with talking about that split and then talking about the scattering, because we see Old Testament prophecy being reiterated and re-spoken on in the New Testament. So of course, once Israel is scattered all across the nations and they're following after ethnic Gentiles, they're now being called Gentiles due to what they're following after. This is all prophecy. Everything comes back into a full circle. When you read Hosea chapter 1 and verse 10, that's what this prophecy is referring to. God, it says, then said God, call his name. Hold on, I gotta zoom in a little bit. Lyomi, for ye are not my people, and I will not be your God. Yet the number of the children of Israel shall be as the sand of the sea, which cannot be measured nor numbered. And it shall come to pass that in that place where it was said unto them, ye are not my people, there it shall be said unto them, ye are the sons of the living God. Then shall the children of Judah, which is representative of the southern kingdom in this context, and the children of Israel be gathered together and appoint themselves one head, and they shall come up out of the land, for great shall be the day of Jezreel. So the prophecy reads that the Israelites of the southern kingdom and the Israelites of the northern kingdom, whether they have been scattered to wherever they are, the gods that they're serving, they're going to come back to the Most High. Now, it is going to be a remnant as we read on in 26 and 27, but that just goes to show you that Israelites were in fact referred to as Gentiles in the so-called New Testament. I'm going to get one more scripture on that in 1 Corinthians chapter 12. Lord willing. 1 Corinthians chapter 12. I believe it's 1 Corinthians. It might be 2nd.
No, you're right.
It's 1st.
God, I'm about to put it on the screen, King.
Okay.
Man, it's just wild how, man, real doctrine, you can't do nothing against the truth, man.
You definitely can't.
For real.
Shalom, Maya call.
Cannot do nothing against the truth.
1 Corinthians chapter 12 from the top now, concerning spiritual gifts, brethren. When you go into that, brethren, is G80, and it's just referring to his kin of the same stock. I would not have you ignorant. Ye know that ye were Gentiles. You got to catch the context of that. Honestly, we kind of read over this because we're really going here to show that Israelites can be called Gentiles, but this encapsulates so much because he's saying were as in past tense, because the coming of Christ, the death, burial, and resurrection gave the ability for Israel to come back into the fold. And that unfolds, that unravels Romans chapter 11. That unravels the Great Commission. That puts a halt on all the false ways to interpret many different things as far as Gentile salvation in the so-called New Testament. It puts a halt to all those false doctrines. Ye were Gentiles. The only way that they become away from the dumb idols that they were serving is if they come back to the Lord through Christ. And we know that Christ was sent for Israel. But it says, carried away unto these dumb idols, even as ye were led. You got to understand, of course, you're going to be following after idols if you grow up in a different side of the world. Israel has been scattered amongst all the nations. We don't know. We don't remember. It's been stripped from us. That's prophecy too in Jeremiah, that we would be discontinued from our heritage. So It's a lot to it, but it's also easy to be understood if you're to put the study in there. You got it, brother.
God, no, that's playing upon tables. And I think that that's very important when you think about like what you just brought out. How could you be? You cannot used to be a Gentile. Gentile in that context only means a different nation. How could you used to be another nation? That's like me saying, you know, I used to be Chinese,
Right.
right? You know what I'm saying? I used to be an ethnic Chinese man. My ancestry has nothing to do with a Chinese man. That's like me saying, hey, I used to be a Hamite, an actual African. You know what I mean? Like that's not what it is. So that's very important to realize and to go into things. And as the brother just segued into of Hellenization, you know that First Corinthians chapter 12, that chapter 10, all of that is going into the Hellenization. That's how they used to be Gentiles. Now, one may argue for the sake and say, well, I thought you said Gentile mean nation. So they used to be a nation. That's why we have to put it in proper context, because there's certain words that people form doctrines around. And even with the etymology, they erase or they rebuke or refute the true etymology, and they form a doctrine around that particular word. So when we go into the Hellenization, and this is why the Apocrypha is so important as well, man, y'all. When you think about, it's quite a few people who don't deal with the Apocrypha because they don't understand that it was canon. Before it was taken out, and before you got your, before you have your King James version that's widely found in the churches today, in 1611 had the Apocrypha in it. The original King James version had the Apocrypha in it, the 14 books. All right. So from that perspective, if you don't have that history, which is canon, which Yahushua quoted, right, from Second Esdras all the way to, you know, Hanukkah, right, which is amazes me in my mind that everyone widely admits that who the world calls Christ did not sin, and he wasn't celebrating pagan holidays or anything that wasn't ordained and biblically rooted and righteous. And we see that Christ, who the world calls Jesus, Yahushua Hamashiach in the Hebrew, that he celebrated the Feast of the Dedication, which can only be found in the Apocrypha of when it was ordained, how to celebrate it, when do you celebrate it, and so forth and so on. So when we talk about Hosea, the first chapter, when we talk about First Corinthians, the 12th chapter, the 10th chapter, when we talk about Romans 9, we talk about Matthew 10, when we talk about the totality, we talk about Ezekiel, the 37th chapter, right? When we talk about these things, we have to realize that it's a culmination of historical events that lead up and line up with prophetic outcomes. And one of those was, even when we go back in the book of Daniel, I believe the 4th chapter, when it's talking about, even in Daniel 7, when it's talking about that fourth beast, right? It's talking about the Greek captivity. But you're not going to find that anywhere except for the Apocrypha, that Greek captivity. That's why you leave off from, you know, you have the Persian, the Medo-Persian captivity. You know, you have, from that perspective, the Greek captivity. Then you have the Roman captivity, but you're not going to find the Greek captivity anywhere in the modern day King James version because they took off that Apocrypha. And that's the Hellenization period. So the systematic erasure of Israelite identity under Greek rule. This is why Israelites in the New Testament are called Greeks. They had been Hellenized for generations. That's why back to this First Corinthians that we go into right here, where it says, ye know that ye were Gentiles, carried away unto these dumb idols, even as you were led. Okay? Because during these times, they did not have Yahushua. They did not have their heritage. It was illegal under Alexander the Greek. Alexander the Great, as they call him. We call him Alexander the Greek freak, and we're not talking about Giannis, right? And the wicked root. After Alexander the Great conquered the known world, Greek culture, language, customs, religions, philosophies. We even see during the time of Ezra, it was certain, and during the time of Nehemiah, after after the fall of Babylon, and after a lot of the southern kingdom went back to Jerusalem to rebuild the walls and things post-exilic times after the exile, we see there was a lot of people who couldn't even speak, a lot of children who couldn't even speak the Hebrew tongue. So we always see a foreshadowing of Hellenization. Now, Hellenization obviously goes into the Greek captivity, but we see where our people weren't, basically following the ways of Yahweh, right? So, bam, after Alexander the Great conquered the known world, Greek culture, language, customs, religion, philosophy was imposed on every conquered people. After Alexander's death, his kingdom was divided among his generals, and from one of them came Antiochus Epiphanes, the wicked root. Now, peep game, y'all. When you look at the empire of Alexander the Great, now we know that the Persian Empire spread 127 provinces. We see that in the book of Esther, right? When what is his name? Which they know as Xerxes now, right? So you see when Alexander conquered Darius and of the Persians and Mede, we see he assumed all of his territory, even to places of northern Africa, which is Egypt, right here, right? So you see how Alexander from Macedon, from Pelia, all the way conquered Egypt, Mesopotamia, Assyria, Media, Babylon, right? The Persian, Bactria, all of these places, including Israel, right? Okay, you see Susa, so forth and so on. So, boom, Alexander, this is a quote. Your ancestors invaded Macedonia and the rest of Greece and did us great harm, though we had done them no prior injury. I have been appointed leader of the Greeks and invaded Asia, and in the desire to take vengeance on Persia for your aggression. This is Alexander's letter to Persian King Darius III, Arian, Nabasis of Alexander II, 14-4. So these are real live letters and historical documents in terms of Alexander and his conquering, right? Go ahead, King, you got it.
No, I wasn't. I'm trying to. My bad. Go ahead.
You got something, King?
No, you got it, King. I was just setting up my screen share.
Okay, all praises. So from that perspective, when we go back into the Hellenization in First Maccabees 1:1-2, and it happened after that Alexander, son of Philip the Macedonian, who came out of the land of Shittim, had smitten Darius, king of the Persians and Medes, that he reigned in his stead the first over Greece, and made many wars and won many strongholds, and slew the kings of the earth. Jumping to verse 10. And there came out of them a wicked root, Antiochus, surnamed Epiphanes, son of Antiochus the king, who had been in hostage at Rome, and he reigned in the 137th year of the kingdom of the Greeks. So when you think about, once again, we brought out Daniel 8, Daniel 11, I would talk about Alexander the Great being that what is it called, a goat head ass Salakia. And then you think about that fourth beast, right, which is talking about the Greek captivity and things of that nature. So as we progress through history, we literally see how the Greeks have built and dominated. In a big part of the Greek culture and the Greek captivity, a big part of the Greek captivity was the Greek culture. The Greeks had something called the polis. The polis was a city that was built with a certain structure to make everybody amalgamate to the ways of the Greek lifestyle. So that's why when you get into the so-called New Testament under the Roman captivity, even our beloved brother Paul, you got to think, he said he was a Jew, right, from Tarsus, which was in the region of Cilicia. All of these were known Hellenized polises from the Greek captivity, where they spoke Greek, they freaked Greek, they drank Greek, they ate Greek, they worshiped Greek. everything was damn Greek. That's why they began to assimilate. And so by the time we get into, the book, the so-called New Testament, you have all of these Israelites who are living like Greeks, who are living like heathens, who were identifying as heathen nation people. So I'm going to wrap up with this. The Greek polis, a city built to assimilate. The Greek word polis means far more than city. It was a self-governing community, a city-state with its own laws, customs, temples, military, and civic identity. That's very important. The polis was the fundamental unit of Greek civilization. To be a citizen of a polis was to participate in its religious festivals, serve in its military, and adopt its culture. It was the primary tool through which Greek identity was transmitted to conquered people. Hellenistic conveys the idea that a mixed, cosmopolitan form of social and cultural life combining Greek traditions with indigenous traditions emerged after Alexander's conquest. The Hellenistic kings spurred this by bringing Greeks to live in the midst of long established indigenous community and by founding new cities on Greek lines. Since these imported Greeks primarily lived in cities, Greek ideas and customs had their greatest impact on urban populations. The great number of people farming the countryside had much less contact with Greek ways of life. Since the kings favored Greek culture, there was never any doubt that it would be adopted by the elite of the Hellenistic kingdoms whatever their own origins. So we see that the Greeks used a very, very direct and a very targeted, right, approach into converting niggas to be Greek, right? Salakia for the language, to follow the Greek cultures and customs and things of that nature, man. You got it, King.
No, all praise to the Most High, man. All that is well said and well studied. Yahweh Shem Yahweh Shai. At Mr. Strikeo, no. Just addressing that real quick. No, you can't ask Mother Mary to pray for us. Yeah, we don't get down with that.
It's off. That's off.
So, la'ah, meaning no. You know what I'm saying? It's not going to do much anyway. You know what I mean? But no, you can't ask Mother Mary to pray for us. You have a specific denomination of Judaism. Yeah, we don't refer to what we, we know that today the term would be Judaism, as far as in, this kingdom that's ran by Esau, the so-called white man. But, this is our Bible. We're the Israelites, and we get back to studying our heritage, our word given to us by the Most High. Thank you. Yeah, I'm about to man. So
that's right.
All praise to the Most High. But moving on. All right, all praise to the Most High. So we're gonna go over here to check this out real quick. All right. Now, just a quick, simple Google search. Now, follow me. This is all gonna make sense. It says, "Were all the disciples Israelites?" Yes, the original 12 apostles / disciples of Jesus were Jewish or Israelites. They were selected from the Jewish community in first century Judea and Galilee to go to the lost sheep of the house of Israel. All praise to the Most High. It says, while disciples had Greek names, they followed Jewish religion and culture. So yeah, some of them could have what you would call Greek names, right? But that just goes to show you even more that your citizenship does not define your ethnicity. Where you grow up in the world does not define your ethnicity. But to the point, all of the disciples were Israelites. Now, let's go to Acts chapter 11. Is the blue letter screen sharing, King?
Let me see, King. Yep, gone. It still is.
All right, when we go to Acts chapter 11, it says, no, I mean mine. You see my blue letter screen?
Gone.
Okay, all praises. Acts chapter 11, verse 26. Now remember, all the disciples are Israelites. And when he had found him, he brought him unto Antioch. And it came to pass that a whole year they assembled themselves with the church and taught much people. And the disciples were called Christians first in Antioch. So the disciples, who are all Israelites, were called Christians. So those Christians were also all Israelites. Now watch this. Watch this.
Oh, yeah. Hey, they on the edge of their seat.
All praise to the Most High.
Lord willing.
Salakia.
Should I get the sound effect out for the cut?
All praises.
Oh, praise Yahweh Shem Shai.
All right, here we go. G5546. Christians, a follower of Christ. Now, when we read here, it says the name was first given to the worshipers of Jesus by the Gentiles, but from the 2nd century onward, accepted by them as a title of honor. Now, those Gentiles obviously were the heathen nation Gentiles that are being referred to as Salakia, as heathens, right? But when we go to, this is what I'm looking for, 1 Corinthians 12. Now keep in mind, this is Paul. And we go over here to verse 2. And we go to Gentiles. Check this out right here. Paul uses the term Gentile for Christians. Now, what did we just find out? All the disciples were Israelites, and the disciples were the Christians. Paul uses the term Gentile for Christians. So when Paul, every time Paul was referring to Gentiles in the context of salvation, he was talking about Christians, because you have to be a follower of Christ. That's the main thing that he's teaching. One of the main things that he's teaching, Salakia. You have to be a follower of Christ. So he's teaching salvation to the Gentiles and teaching them to be Christians, but the Christians are Israelites.
Man, that's a mean breakdown by Shem Yahushai.
All praise to the Most High. So Lord willing, everybody can see and understand these Christians, these Gentiles, in the context of salvation, all Israelites every single time. How about Shem Yahushai? You got it, King.
Well, and hey, all praise Yahweh Shem Yahushai. And as you saw, don't get tripped up because of the cities. And that's why when we go into Acts 2 in Pentecost, or even, get this real quick, even when we go back into those cities, right? The mega cities of the Greco world, because you saw, brother brought up Antioch, where they were first called Christians in Antioch, right? So after Alexander's death, his generals built massive cities across the conquered territories. Each served as a center of Greek culture, designed to reshape the identity of the surrounding populations. Now look, they were designed to reshape the identity. So if you were an Israelite that was Hellenized, okay, and even when we look at Revelations, the 2nd chapter, when you think about to the 7 churches, you see Ephesus, Pergamon, right, so forth and so, Antioch, so forth and so on, because these were major sinners, not sinners, centers of Greek culture and of Israelites, right? So you got Alexandria, the intellectual capital of the ancient world, right? Antioch, which is in Syria, one of the largest cities in the ancient world and a major center of Hellenized culture. It became a hub where Israelites were first called Christians. Brothers just brought that out. Pergamon, all right, Asia Minor, known for its massive library, rivaling Alexandria. its renowned medical schools, and the great altar of Zeus. You got Satan's seat in Revelations 2 and 3, right? You got to realize that there was a lot going on in the ancient world that wasn't just surface level. Okay, there was a lot of indulgence in wickedness and idolatry and things that Israelites were partakers on over generations. So it became a part of their identity. That's why Christ had to come back and die, be buried, suffer resurrection. All right, why that blood had to be spilled so that the children of Israel, chiefly all 12 tribes, right, could be gathered back together in one fold, right? Why he said, I have sheep that are not of this fold. We know he was teaching to the Jews chiefly, but he had other sheep that were not of that fold. That's the northern kingdom, who had went off into idolatry through the Hellenization and so forth and so on, as well as through, the scattering and things of that nature as well. Then you have Ephesus, a major trade hub and the site of the temple of Artemis, one of the 7 wonders. Paul taught here for 2 years at the school of Tyrannus. He said, I taught for 2 years in the school of one Tyrannus, disputing daily the Jews and the Greeks. All right. And then you have Corinth, where you see the book of 1 Corinthians, 2 Corinthians, was a commercial crossroad connecting east and west, known for its wealth, immorality, and the Israelite congregation Paul wrote 2 epistles to. So we see that even when we talked about the Christians who were known as Israelites, the Israelites who were known as Christians, who Paul was teaching to in the context of Gentiles, we know this is how they were Hellenized, through living in these polises, these Greek centers of culture. You got it, King.
No, all praise to the Most High. No, that's extremely well said. All praise to the Most High. Bear with me for 1 second. I'm pulling up the Apocrypha.
God.
Lord willing. Is my hold on, no, I gotta add it to the stage. Salakia. Oh man. Alright, pick it up for 1 second, King. Salakia.
All right, con, no issue. So even in terms of going into that, what it also continues into is, understanding that it was also illegal for us to even call ourselves Greeks. To call ourselves Israelites, right? And that was even a part of the assimilation. So when you go into that and you really think about, why were they calling themselves, why were Israelites calling themselves Greeks? Why were they calling themselves Parthians, Medes? Why were they calling them Egyptians? Right? Why were they calling themselves, Ephesians and all of these various names? Is because they were Hellenized.
God. All praise to the Most High. No, these are the facts, man. And that's why the letters that Paul was writing were going, here goes the racist God nation. All praise to the Most High. Yeah, that's why the letters of Paul were going to places like Ephesus, right? And to Philippi and, to Corinth, because Israelites are scattered across all of the world, right? And all praise to the Most High at Carlton Moore. Yeah, Deuteronomy 28 and 64. That's going into the curse that Israel would be scattered amongst these nations, right? And when we go to the book of Tobit, as the brother was teaching earlier, man, the Apocrypha is so key in understanding how we would ever be called Gentiles in the first place, how we would be called Greeks in the first place. Breaking down the Greek captivity, that's a whole separate thing. That's a whole nother lesson. But there's a reason why Israelites are even called Greeks in the so-called New Testament, right? Starting from the top, in Tobit 13, it says, Then Tobit wrote a prayer of rejoicing and said, Blessed be God that liveth forever, and blessed be his kingdom. For he doth scourge and hath mercy. He leadeth down to hell and bringeth up again. Neither is there any that can avoid his hand. Now this is key right here. Confess him before the Gentiles. Let's make this separation here. There's a comma there, but we understand we don't even need the comma. Listen, confess him before the Gentiles, ye children of Israel. So you got the Gentiles, then you got ye children of Israel. So there's a different context to this Gentiles. And how do we know? Because the following phrase, for he hath scattered us among them. He hath scattered us among them. We're scattered amongst the ethnic Gentiles. So we must confess Yahweh Bashem Yahushai before the ethnic Gentiles as the Israelites. So of course, yeah, you might have had some ethnic Gentiles that were kind of listening in as Paul, the other apostles, the disciples are going around and they're teaching this truth. They're teaching that the kingdom of God is at hand, but to the Israelites. And how do we know that? Let's get Matthew real quick. Matthew chapter 10. Gentiles is always going to have a context, and it's always has to be kept proper. Now, these are the words of Yahushai, Matthew chapter 10, verse 5. These 12 Yahushai sent forth and commanded them, saying, Go not into the way of the Gentiles. What does he mean by that? If Yahushai, who the world calls Jesus Christ, is sent for the house of Israel, do you think this context of Gentiles is talking about Israelites? Or is he saying, don't go to the heathens? And into any city of the Samaritans enter ye not, but rather go to the lost sheep of the house of Israel. So he's saying, don't go to the ethnic Gentiles. But then someone says, well, Paul, he was sent to the Gentiles. So hey, Paul was on the same page as Yahushua. Paul was not teaching the ethnic Gentiles about salvation and how to obtain it. He was teaching the Israelite Gentiles because they were following after the ways of the ethnic Gentiles. You can't get around that. You can't say that Yahushua, who the world calls Jesus Christ, did not tell the disciples right here to not go to the Gentiles. But then he said in the very next breath, but go rather to the lost sheep of the house of Israel. How are you a lost sheep in the first place? Because you're scattered, because you don't know who your God is. You don't know what your customs are. You don't know the laws, the statutes, and the commandments, because you've been growing up amongst Gentiles, like we just read in Tobit chapter 13. Yahushua wasn't there for half of Israel, so there's no way to try to put Israel versus Israel right here, or it's heathens, don't go to them, but Israel, go to them. All praise to the Most High. You got it, King.
Hey, you know what cuts that? That's a mighty, mighty, mighty point, man, through the spirit and power of Yahweh Bashem Yahushai. And to land me back on that, what trips me out is people want to act like everybody who says a lot of this Gentile salvation, or no, it's not talking about Israelites who are living like Gentile. 90% of them are going to quote and run to Paul. And you got to understand, Paul was a Hellenized Israelite himself.
Right.
You got to tap into that, Lord willing. All right. Paul of Tarsus, a Hellenized Israelite himself. Before examining Paul's mission to the scattered, consider this. Paul was himself a Hellenized Israelite, born in Tarsus, which was a polis, a major Greek city in Cilicia, which is modern-day southern Turkey. He held a Roman citizenship, spake Greek fluently. By every external identification, Paul was a Greek. But guess what? That was not his bloodline, though. He was 100% Israelite by bloodline. You got to tap into that and realize what's going on. Let's get Acts 21 and 39. It says, but Paul said, I am a man which am a Jew of Tarsus. So see, Paul knew his nationality. Like we go into Romans 11 and 1, right? Where he says, hey, Paul was a Benjamite. Okay, which is that's another cut for real. Because when you think about that, he says he's a Jew, but we know he's from Benjamin. But we know the southern kingdom, Judah, Benjamin, and Levi. You follow me? Right. That's another clean cut right there. So, but once again, a Jew of Tarsus, a city in Cilicia, a citizen of no mean city, and I beseech thee, suffer me to speak unto thy people. Acts 22 and 3. I am verily a man which am a Jew, born in Tarsus, a city in Cilicia, yet brought up in this city at the feet of Gamaliel. Now we know Gamaliel was a master of the law, and taught according to the perfect manner of the law of the fathers, and was zealous towards God, as ye all are this day. Because remember, Paul was persecuting the church. He knew who the children of Israel were. Philippians 3 and 5, circumcised the 8th day of the stock of Israel, of the tribe of Benjamin, and Hebrew of Hebrews, as touching the law of Pharisee. So we see Paul, although he was Hellenized, he knew what his nationality was. And that's why Paul was going after other brothers and sisters who did not know their nationality and were lost, but he knew their nationality. And he was trying to convince them. And that's why you think that he was he magnified his ministry as an apostle unto the Gentiles. Because Paul, what better, really think about this, what better brother to send to those, except for to the children of Israel who were Hellenized, but a child of Israel who was Hellenized. Really think about that, man.
No, for real.
You know, it's like you're gonna send a hooper to talk to a hooper. He can relate. He's like, you know, I kind of been in the game. You know, I know my step back. I got the Euro step. I got it. You know, I've been in fourth quarter. I've been on. That's why oftentimes the best coaches are those who actually played that sport, because they can identify with all of the elements that an athlete faces in that particular sport, right? So, you know, these are things that we got to consider and be mindful of. Acts 9 and 11. And the Lord said unto him, arise and go into the street, which is called Straight, and inquire in the house of Judas for one called Saul of Tarsus, for behold, he prayeth, right? So once again, connecting the dots. Paul was born in Tarsus, a major Greek city in Cilicia, not in the land of Israel. Paul was Hellenized. He was a Roman citizen. He held a citizenship from birth. Remember, Paul in Acts, he said he was freeborn. But remember, the other one said, but I have obtained my citizen with a great sum. Because in the Roman captivity, you could be born freeborn as in the Roman Republic, or you could buy your citizenship. You follow what I'm saying? He spoke Greek fluently. He wrote his epistles in Greek, right? Yet he was of the tribe of Benjamin, out of the stock of Israel. So he knew his bloodline. He knew his seed line, his lineage, right? And he was trained in the law. And this is the thing about it, right? That's very profound. Our beloved brother Paul was trained in the law. Paul was trained in the law so he wouldn't fall. Got a couple little bars there, you know what I'm saying? No, but because he was trained in the law, he knew the prophecies. He knew that the Israelites were scattered. It's almost like Paul is sitting there, knowing the prophecies, knowing the law, right? Knowing his heritage, knowing the history. So Paul looking around like, it was no mystery to Paul that he was talking to Israelites. Paul never thought 2,000 plus years after he walked the earth that people will be confused thinking that he was writing to everybody. Y'all thinking that. Paul wasn't confused of who he was writing with, or writing for, or writing to, right? So we got to understand as we wrap up, y'all, this is the basis of understanding who Gentile salvation is for. And I'm saying it just like that. Gentile salvation is for the Israelite Gentiles who were Hellenized, who didn't know their identity, who were part of the polar system, who were who went through the Greek and then into the Roman captivity to be even more confused, who were spread to the four corners of the world. That's who, those are the Gentiles that can be saved according to the salvation of Christ that he talks about in Luke 1:68 on down. You got it, King, for closing remarks.
Praise to the Most High, man. Big Bite Chomper asked for you to call that verse again.
Which verse was it?
I believe it was the last one you went into.
Into the Acts? Or is he talking about Acts 9 and 11?
I think right before that.
That Philippians 3 and 5, that circumcised on the 8th day, of the stock of Israel, of the tribe of Benjamin, a Hebrew of the Hebrews, as touching the law of Pharisee.
God, all praise to the Most High. And what's crazy too on that, I'm gonna just get a couple things real quick. And that Acts 9, it's beautiful that you were speaking on how much more great it was for, you know, a Hellenized Jew himself to be sent to the Hellenized of Israel. It says in Acts 9 and 13, then Ananias answered, Lord, I have heard by many of this man how much evil he hath done to thy saints at Jerusalem. And here he hath authority from the chief priest to bind all that call on thy name. But the Lord said unto him, Go thy way, for he is a chosen vessel unto me to bear my name before the Gentiles and kings and the children of Israel, man. Hey, all praise to the Most High. So Yahushua was saying, look, I know what he did. I know what he was up to, but he's going to bear my name before everybody. So don't even worry about it. So he was a chosen vessel, man. It was a beautiful decision. All praise to the Most High. Real quick, I'm just going to this Isaiah to wrap it up. I'm gonna go to Isaiah 14 first. Two scriptures in Isaiah. Isaiah 14, in the top, it says, For the Lord will have mercy on Jacob and will yet choose Israel and set them in their own land, and the stranger shall be joined with them, and they shall cleave to the house of Jacob. All praise to the Most High. And the people shall take them and bring them to their place, and the house of Israel shall possess them in the land of the Lord for servants and handmaids. And they shall take them captives, whose captives they were, and they shall rule over their oppressors. So obviously, this is talking about all of Israel taking heathen nations as a possession, right? It says, And it shall come to pass in that day that the Lord shall give thee rest from thy sorrow, Salaki, and from thy fear, and from the hard bondage wherein thou was made to serve. Now, quickly going over to Isaiah 54, just lining this up. Isaiah 54 and 2, Enlarge the place of thy tent, and let them stretch forth the curtains of thine habitation. Spare not, lengthen thy cords, and strengthen thy stakes. For thou shalt break forth on the right hand, on the left. This is prophecy. And thy seed, the seed of Israel, shall inherit the Gentiles and make the desolate cities to be inhabited. So if you know, Isaiah 14 is directly going into Isaiah chapter 54. It's the same author, and it's within the same context. So the Israelites are going to inherit the Gentiles as a possession, the same possession that is being referred to as the strangers in Isaiah chapter 14. Obviously, that is outside of the nation of the children of Israel. So all praise to the Most High, just showing another instance where Gentiles has to be referred to in its proper context, and how Israel will inherit the Gentiles. Obviously, Israel's not going to inherit themselves and possess themselves in the kingdom of heaven. You got it, King.
Con, well said. Well, you know, this is part one. This is part one through the Spirit and power of Yahweh Shem Yahweh Shai. Once again, we come on here to, man, to break down the doctrine, the correct doctrine, right? Not in vanity or vainglory or in unsincerity, but really just trying to bring out the correct understanding. So, Lord willing, you can be encouraged that the Most High is faithful and the Most High will not refute or will not go back on his promise and his word that he gave the children of Israel. So with that, we want to give all praise, glory, honor to the Most High God. You got it, King.
God, at sendano.in with your question. You want to post the O.F.I email, Lord willing, and you can you know, email us and get at us with that question. You know, we can either, you know, answer you via email, or we can have you join a Zoom call, Lord willing. But we are up to answering questions. So there's the email right there. You can email there, and you can expect a response. All praise to the Most High at our earliest convenience, Lord willing.
Right. Con, you got it, King.
God, all praises. With that, we give all praise, honor, and glory to Yahweh Shem Yahweh Shai. Lord willing, everything was edifying to the sheep, man. Edifying to anyone that was listening, right? All praise to the Most High Yahweh Shem Yahweh Shai. Until next time, Lord willing.
Kwame
Shalom,
Chop.
saints.
Shalom.
Shalom.